Imagine a storm raging on a distant planet, lightning cracking through dark skies, and beneath it, a massive creature, a dragon, pleads for help. Its babies, trapped in rising floodwaters, are fighting for their lives, and the only hope lies in the hands of two unlikely heroes. As the clock ticks down, they must defy all rules to save them. Will they succeed, or will the storm claim everything? Stay tuned to find out. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and like the video. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. On the mining station Orion 4, floating above the distant planet Aetherian 9, Jax Ron worked quietly. The hum of machines was constant, the background noise of a life spent fixing broken equipment. Jax had been doing this job for over a decade. His hands, now covered in black oil and grease, were a testament to his experience. He had repaired every machine on this station at least a dozen times, and today was no different. A worn cloth in his hand, he wiped the grease from his fingers, taking a brief pause before heading to his next task. The station wasn't large. Only 23 people lived and worked here, all of them dedicated to mining valuable minerals from Aetherian 9. The station itself was nothing more than a series of connected modules, with the occasional drilling rig reaching out into the planet's surface. It wasn't much to look at, but it kept running, and that was the point. Jax, the chief mechanic, made sure of that. Whenever something broke, whether it was a drill, a power generator, or a ventilation system, Jax was called in to fix it. His reputation as the go-to fixer had earned him a quiet life, one that he preferred. There was something about the isolation of space that brought him peace. No distractions, no unnecessary noise. Today, the station was particularly quiet. Most of the crew were either asleep or deep underground, working tirelessly to extract precious silver crystals from the planet below. Jax was alone in the repair shop, focused on the task at hand. In front of him sat the broken drill, a massive piece of machinery as tall as he was. It weighed several tons and had a mind of its own, constantly breaking down in the most inconvenient ways. It had stopped working yesterday while digging for the silver crystals, and now it was Jax's responsibility to figure out why. The drill was a complicated machine. Wires, metal plates, and hydraulic tubes sprawled across the interior like a jungle. As Jax opened the side panel and peered inside, he noticed a few things. Some of the wires were frayed, while others had darkened from overheating. One blue wire in particular looked completely burned out. Jax smiled. This was an easy fix. He knew the drill inside and out. Grabbing a fresh wire from his toolkit, he got to work, replacing the damaged part with practiced hands. As he twisted the last bolt into place, he leaned back and wiped his forehead. Another problem solved. He was just about to test the drill when the sound of an alarm sliced through the calm. It was loud and shrill, sending a shock of adrenaline through Jax's body. The sound echoed through the empty halls of the station, rattling the walls. Red lights blinked to life along the corridors, casting an eerie glow on everything they touched. Jax dropped his tools and jumped to his feet. Something was wrong. He sprinted toward the control room, his boots making loud clanging sounds on the metal floor. His heart raced as the alarm continued to blare in the background. The control room was on the other side of the station, a small but well-equipped space with large windows that provided a view of the planet Aetherian 9 below. As Jax burst through the door, he found his friend and colleague, Ava Lark, already at the controls. Ava's face was pale, and her eyes were wide with worry. "What's going on?" Jax asked, still catching his breath from the run. Ava didn't look away from the monitor. Instead, she pointed toward the window. "Look outside." Jax followed her gaze, his eyes locking on to the planet below. It was a sight he had seen 1,000 times before, but today was different. The sky over Etherian 9 was dark, covered by a massive blanket of swirling clouds. Bolts of lightning arced across the sky, illuminating the clouds in unnatural colors. Jax frowned, trying to make sense of it. There had been storms before, but this was something else entirely. "What is that?" Jax muttered, narrowing his eyes. Ava didn't answer at first. She was staring at the monitor, typing rapidly into the computer. The screen flashed, displaying a series of readings and data points. "Whatever it is, it's huge," she finally said, her voice laced with unease. Jax squinted at the screen and then back at the planet. "That's no storm," he said, his voice low. Something was moving on the planet's surface, something massive. At first, Jax thought it was just a mountain or a rock formation. But as he watched, the shape began to move, slowly, deliberately. "Is that alive?" Jax whispered. The shape grew clearer, revealing a large creature with a long neck, a massive body, and legs that resembled tree trunks. It was unmistakable now. It was some kind of dragon. The scales of the creature caught the light, shimmering like diamonds as it moved through the storm. Jax's mouth went dry. "That's a dragon." Ava's fingers froze over the keyboard. "No way. Dragons aren't real." "Well, that one sure as hell is," Jax said, his voice tinged with disbelief. The creature, still too far to be fully visible, let out a deep, resonating sound. The sound wasn't a roar, though. It was melodic, almost like music. Jax frowned, leaning in closer to the window. The creature repeated the sounds, a pattern that seemed too deliberate to be random. "It's trying to communicate," Jax said, his mind racing. The thought of an intelligent alien species, especially one that resembled something out of myth, sent a chill down his spine. Ava tapped the keyboard again, enlarging the image of the dragon on the screen. The details became sharper. "That's impossible," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "But it's real." Jax stared at the creature for a moment longer, before his attention shifted to the rising storm below. Something was about to happen, something they weren't prepared for. The calm before the storm had ended, and now they had no choice but to face the unknown. As the dragon's sounds continued to echo through the station, Jax's instincts kicked in. Something was coming, and he could feel it deep in his bones. Etherian 9 wasn't just another mining planet anymore. Something extraordinary had just entered their world, and it wasn't leaving without a fight. Jax couldn't tear his eyes away from the screen. The creature below was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Its long neck swayed like a great living serpent, and its massive body moved with a strange grace. The shimmering scales reflected every bolt of lightning, glowing in brilliant colors that danced across the sky. Jax's mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. What was this thing? And why was it here? Ava stood beside him, her face pale and her hands shaking as she typed furiously on the control panel. "There's no way this is possible," she muttered under her breath, almost to herself. "We've been monitoring this planet for years, and we've never seen anything like this. Nothing of this size, and certainly nothing alive like this." Jax leaned in closer to the screen. The dragon-like creature had stopped moving, its huge form standing still on the surface, its head turned toward the station. And for a moment, it seemed to be staring directly at them. The hairs on the back of Jax's neck stood up. It felt like the creature was aware of their presence. "Is it looking at us?" Jax whispered, unable to keep the unease from his voice. Ava glanced at him, her eyes wide. I think it is, but that's impossible. No creature could survive out there in this storm, let alone… She stopped, looking back at the monitor, her voice trailing off. The storm had intensified. The clouds above Etherian 9 were darker now, swirling faster. The lightning crackled with a fierceness Jax had never seen before, and the wind outside the station's windows howled like a living thing. The creature below remained unmoving, as if it had no fear of the storm. In fact, it almost seemed to welcome it. Then, without warning, the creature emitted a sound, a deep, resonant note that reverberated through the walls of the station. It was not like any sound Jax had ever heard before. It was a low, musical tone that carried a rhythm, almost like a psalm. Ava froze, her fingers stilling above the keyboard. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice thick with disbelief. Jax didn't know how to answer. "It's not random," he said quietly. "It's a pattern. It's trying to communicate." Ava's hands hovered over the control panel as she ran a quick analysis on the sound. The computer's readout was clear. The creature was repeating the same sequence of sounds over and over, almost like it was waiting for something. Or someone. "This doesn't make sense," Ava muttered. "We've never seen anything like this. No records of creatures like this. No data on any living species on this planet capable of this level of communication." Jax couldn't take his eyes off the screen. The creature had begun moving again, slowly, methodically. It took a few steps forward, its massive body undulating through the storm. Then it paused, lifting its head high, and released another musical note, even louder than before. This time, 4. It felt like the sound hit Jax's chest, vibrating through him. "It wants something," Jax said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's calling for help, isn't it?" Ava looked at him, uncertainty written all over her face. "We've never encountered anything that could communicate like this. How could it even know we're here?" Jax stepped closer to the window, peering out at the storm below. The lightning was flashing faster now, illuminating the massive form of the creature. It seemed almost calm, moving with a deliberate slowness that belied its size. It looked like it was searching for something, its eyes scanning the horizon. And then, suddenly, it turned its gaze back toward the station. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence in the control room was deafening. Then, the creature's head tilted, and Jax felt a shiver run down his spine. It was as if the dragon-like beast was trying to make direct eye contact with him, as though it knew he was watching. And then, to his surprise, the creature made another sound. This time, it wasn't a musical note. It was something different, something urgent. The deep sound seemed to rise in pitch, becoming more intense and faster in its rhythm. The creature was in distress. "It's calling for help," Jax said, his voice firm now. "It's asking for help." Ava didn't respond immediately. She was too focused on the screen, trying to make sense of the situation. The computer analysis wasn't offering much insight. The creature's communication was clearly intelligent, but it was unlike anything they had encountered. Its patterns didn't match any known language or form of communication. Jax's heart pounded as he stared out at the creature, unsure of what to do next. Then, without warning, the creature made another sound. This time, it was different again. It was more like a series of deep, almost rhythmic thumps. The ground beneath the station seemed to tremble with the force of the sound. Jax felt it in his bones, a strange sensation that made his stomach tighten. It's It's directing us, Jax said, his voice low but urgent. It's trying to tell us something. Look at its movements. Ava followed his gaze, watching the creature as it pointed one of its enormous legs toward the planet's surface. It seemed to be pointing at something specific, its long neck twisting as if to direct their attention. What is it showing us? Ava asked, a note of fear creeping into her voice. The creature's movements were unmistakable. It was pointing toward a valley, a deep cut in the land below where rushing water had begun to form. The storm had caused flooding, and the waters were rising fast, pushing through the rocky terrain. The baby dragons, if they existed, were trapped in that valley. Jax felt a cold wave of realization wash over him. "Those are its babies," Jax whispered, his voice tight with fear. "It's showing us where they are. They're trapped." Ava's heart. "We need to help them, right now." Jax looked at her, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his shoulders. They were no longer observers in this strange event. They were part of it, and the creature, whatever it was, had chosen them to help. The storm was still raging outside, but Jax knew one thing for sure. They had to act quickly. The dragon was waiting, and its babies needed them now. The tension in the control room was palpable. Jax could feel his heart pounding in his chest as he stared at the massive creature below, still standing tall against the storm. Its eyes, filled with an intelligence Jax couldn't fully comprehend, never left the station. It was as if the dragon-like beast knew that it was running out of time, and that they were the key to saving its young. Jax looked over at Ava, who was staring at the monitor in disbelief. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she didn't seem to know what to do next. "We can't just sit here," Jax said, breaking the silence. His voice was steady, but there was an urgency to it that he couldn't hide. "We have to do something." Ava looked up at him, her face pale. "You're right, but what do we even do? We're just a mining station. We're not equipped for this." "We have to try," Jax replied, turning back to the window. The dragon was still standing motionless, but its massive body seemed to sway with a rhythmic pattern, as if it were pacing the edge of some great cliff. Jax felt a wave of empathy wash over him. The creature's distress was clear. There was no question that it was in agony, unable to reach its babies, trapped in the rising floodwaters below. The storm was growing stronger by the minute. The sky above Etherian 9 had turned nearly black, the clouds swirling with increasing ferocity. The wind howled like a living thing, slamming against the station's windows, rattling them as if it wanted to tear them apart. Yet, the dragon seemed untouched by the chaos around it. It stood tall, unwavering, despite the tempest that raged all around. It wasn't the storm it feared. It was the water, the rising flood that was sweeping through the valley where its babies were struggling to survive. Jax turned to Ava. "We can't wait any longer. We need to act now." Ava swallowed hard, clearly torn. "But we're not authorized to." "We're not waiting for permission," Jax cut her off. "Those babies won't make it 6 hours. We don't have that long." Ava hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with defying station protocol, but she knew Jax was right. They couldn't waste any more time. The creature's distress calls had become louder, more insistent. There was no mistaking it now. It was asking for help. No, it was pleading for it. Jax could see it in the creature's posture, its movements, and the way it kept glancing at them as if trying to convey its desperation. The dragon was fully aware that its babies were in danger, and it had no way of saving them without help. Ava finally nodded. "Okay, let's do it." With a sense of urgency, Jax and Ava moved swiftly to the shuttle bay. The decision was made. They would leave the safety of the station and head into the storm, risking everything to save the dragon's babies. Jax had never been one for heroics, but the thought of those helpless creatures, stranded in a flooded valley, struggling to survive, stirred something deep inside him. He had to help. "The shuttle's ready," Ava said, her voice sharp with determination. She had clearly shaken off her hesitation, driven by the same sense of urgency that now gripped Jax. They both climbed into the small shuttle, a sturdy craft designed for quick trips to the planet's surface. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. Outside, the storm raged. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the massive shape of the dragon below. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, shaking the craft slightly as it lifted off the station's surface. Jax gripped the controls firmly as they ascended, his eyes fixed on the planet below. The dragon's shape grew clearer as they neared the surface, its shimmering crystal scales catching the flicker of lightning. The storm's winds tossed the shuttle back and forth, but Jax held steady. "We need to get to that valley," Jax said, his voice tight with focus. "If we're going to do this, we have to move fast." Ava nodded, keeping her eyes on the planet's surface. "I've got the coordinates. I'm guiding you in." The shuttle descended rapidly, the turbulence becoming more intense as they neared the planet's surface. Jax could see the valley now. Its once calm waters were transformed into a raging flood, with debris and rocks swirling in the current. The baby dragons were still struggling, trying to stay afloat as the water continued to rise around them. Jax's heart sank. The babies were huge, much larger than he had expected, probably about the size of a small car. They were no longer just creatures from a myth. They were real, and they were in danger. The mother dragon, still perched on the edge of the valley, turned toward the shuttle as they approached. She let out another series of sounds, more urgent this time, and Jax felt a pang of fear. She was watching them, waiting. The mother knew they were coming to help. But would they be able to reach her babies in time? Ava's voice came through the comms. "We're almost there. Get ready." The shuttle landed roughly near the edge of the flooded valley, close enough to the water to see the baby dragons clearly. Jax took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He had no idea how they were going to pull this off, but they didn't have time to waste. He grabbed the emergency kit and rushed to the shuttle's hatch. Ava followed closely behind, her face determined. "We need to move quickly," followed, Jax said, glancing back at the mother dragon. She was still watching them, her gaze filled with a kind of silent hope. Jax understood now. This wasn't just a rescue mission. It was a chance to prove that even in the darkest moments, help could come from the most unlikely places. "Let's save those babies," Ava said firmly. As Jax stepped out of the shuttle and into the storm, he knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. The dragon had asked for help, and they would give it, no matter the cost. The storm had worsened. Jax and Ava stood at the edge of the flooded valley, their boots sinking into the mud as the rain fell in torrents. The wind howled like a wild animal, but the urgency of the situation kept them focused. The baby dragons were still struggling in the rising water, their large bodies fighting against the current. The water was moving fast now, swirling around the jagged rocks, and Jax could see the exhaustion in their eyes. They needed help, and they needed it fast. "We don't have much time," Jax said, his voice strained from the cold and the pressure. He looked at Ava, who was already adjusting the emergency equipment they had brought from the shuttle. Ropes, flotation devices, and a small inflatable boat were ready to go. They had to act quickly, or the baby dragons wouldn't make it. Ava nodded, her face grim. "Let's move." They waded into the cold water, the current pulling at their legs as they pushed forward. The baby dragons were much bigger than they had expected, each one the size of a small car. Despite their size, they were struggling to stay above the water, their crystal-like scales flashing in the lightning. Jax's heart tightened. They were so close, yet so far. The mother dragon stood on the edge of the valley, watching them with a mix of hope and fear. She knew that Jax and Ava were her only chance. The youngest of the baby dragons was having the hardest time. Its small body was barely staying above the water, its movements sluggish as it fought to keep its head above the rising tide. The current was too strong for it to make it to safety on its own. Jax could see the fear in its eyes, and it hit him hard. This wasn't just about saving creatures. It was about saving lives, no matter how alien they were. "We need to get to the smallest one first," Jax said, his voice low but urgent. He knew they didn't have the luxury of time. The smallest dragon was struggling the most, and it was their priority. Ava nodded and quickly grabbed the inflatable boat from their equipment. She tossed it into the water, and Jax jumped in, trying to navigate the current. The boat bobbed and jerked, but Jax steadied it as best as he could. With a steady hand, he steered the boat toward the baby dragon. The dragon hesitated at first, its large eyes filled with confusion and fear, but it didn't swim away. Instead, it seemed to understand that the humans were there to help. "It's okay," Jax murmured as he reached out, his voice calm. "We're here to help you." The mother dragon, watching from the edge, made a soft, rumbling sound, as if encouraging her baby. The baby dragon stopped struggling against the current and allowed Jax to approach. Carefully, Jax used the front of the boat to nudge the baby dragon toward shallower water, where the current was weaker. It took a few tries, but eventually they reached a small ledge where the baby could stand. Its legs, shaking with exhaustion, finally found solid ground, and it slowly pulled itself out of the water. "We did it," Ava said, her voice filled with relief. She looked over at the mother dragon, who was watching with what could only be described as gratitude. Jax nodded, but there was no time to celebrate. 2 more babies were still in danger. They quickly moved on to the second baby, a much larger dragon. 0. This one seemed stronger than the first, but the current was still fierce, and it was getting more difficult to maneuver the boat. The baby dragon was swimming in circles, trying to find a way to escape the swift current. Jax and Ava worked together, trying to push the boat into position, but the baby dragon was wary, unsure of the humans' intentions. "We need to get it closer to the ledge," Jax said, scanning the area. The water was rising fast, and they couldn't risk losing this one too. Ava studied the situation. "There's a narrow ledge over there," she pointed. "If we can get it to that spot, it might be able to climb up." Jax nodded, and together they guided the boat toward the rocky ledge. The baby dragon seemed to sense their intentions and began to swim toward the ledge, its movement slow but steady. Just as they neared the rocks, Jax and Ava used the boat to push the dragon toward the ledge. The baby hesitated, but then, with a final push, it made it. It scrambled onto the rocks, its claws scraping against the wet surface as it finally found safety. "One more to go," Jax said, his voice tense. But he could already see the third baby dragon in the distance, trapped against a pile of boulders, the water rising around it at an alarming rate. This one was the largest of them all, and it was caught in the most dangerous part of the flood. "We need to hurry," Ava said, panic creeping into her voice. "It's too close to those rocks. If we don't move fast, it's going to be crushed." Jax didn't hesitate. He knew this was their final chance. The current was brutal, and the rocks around the baby dragon were jagged and sharp. With all his strength, Jax steered the boat toward the trapped dragon. The mother dragon, still watching from above, let out a series of urgent sounds. She seemed to be trying to direct them, her eyes fixed on the baby in danger. "We can't do it alone," Jax said, his voice strained. "We need help." To Jax's surprise, the mother dragon moved closer to the water's edge, lowering her long neck toward the rocks. She stretched her powerful body as far as it could go, using her strength to help guide the baby toward the shallows. With a final, powerful push, the mother dragon's neck wrapped around the baby, lifting it gently out of the water. Jax and Ava watched, stunned, as the mother dragon carefully placed her baby on the rocky shore. The storm was still raging, but they had done it. All 3 baby dragons were safe. The mother dragon made a soft, grateful sound, her eyes filled with relief. The storm was far from over, but for now, they had succeeded. As Jax and Ava made their way back to the shuttle, they both knew one thing for sure. They had just witnessed something extraordinary. They had not only saved the lives of 3 creatures from another world, but they had also learned that sometimes the most unexpected heroes can come in the form of ancient, intelligent beings. The mother dragon watched them go, her eyes glowing in the fading stormlight. They had helped her, and in return, she had shown them a side of Aetherian 9 that no one had ever imagined. It was a side filled with wonder, mystery, and most of all, the power of connection.